And we're excited to hang out with one of our guys from PFF, Brad Spielberger. And Brad, you told me before we started rolling that your vibes are as high as the locker room, brother. And I got to be honest, if your vibes are as high as the post-game locker room for the Las Vegas Raiders, you're doing something right, my friend. How are you?
I think it gets much better than that. Yeah, obviously doing great if I'm saying that coming in, and I'm sure that the vibes on your end and in that building are at an all-time high as well. The Pierce and Kelly era off to a great start.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just start here, right? You go back to Sunday and take away the victory cigars and take away just the increase in energy and enthusiasm and all that, right? You look purely at the score sheet, right? Raiders, it was the number that the fans have talked about all year, 21, 21, 21. It was the mythical number that this offense couldn't reach. All of a sudden, they get 24 in the first half. So outside of the vibes and just the natural infusion that Antonio Pierce has kind of put into this locker room, like what did you see that allowed the Raiders to be successful against the Giants?
I think it's actually super important to start here too, because some people kind of thinking, oh, it's the Giants. This Giants defense had actually played very good football the last month of the season, and we'd also seen Aiden O'Connell, particularly against the blitz, where the Giants had the second highest blitz rate in the NFL, even dating back to college a little bit, was not a strong suit of his. Obviously, took a bunch of sacks against the Chargers, not necessarily blitzing, just not getting the ball out quickly enough. And I think we saw massive growth in that regard. Obviously, the bomb to Trey Tucker for 50 yards down the right seam. So a lot of good, not only in the positives, but also avoiding a lot of those negatives. I think it's huge to see from a rookie quarterback and is signs to points to more positive things to come.
And one guy that we've talked a lot about over the past, call it 72 hours, who I think deserves a lot of credit is our new interim offensive coordinator, Bo Hardegree, for putting Aiden in a position to succeed, right? We look at that opening drive, and it was 5 runs and a single pass, and the single pass worked out pretty well for Aiden O'Connell. But, I mean, how important is that in your opinion to kind of not throw the entire kitchen sink at your rookie quarterback making his second career start?
It's huge. And look, you're going to retain a guy like a Josh Jacobs for a reason, right? And you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, a guy that I know they were high on, even coming into the season, thought he might compete for starts, over the course of the year. But it is, right? You don't want to put too much on his plate and overwhelm him and make him be a drop back passer so often. But yeah, also, you have an offensive line that is playing really well this year, and we'll probably get into that a little bit. But a guy in Josh Jacobs who he can be a volume running back as well. Not just an efficient guy, a guy that can force missed tackles, that can break off explosives, but also a guy that can handle, a 25 carry workload, on a week-to-week basis. Maybe don't want to do that every single game, but it's in there, and it was good to see this past week.
I'm glad you brought up the offensive line, the big fellas up front, because, kind of lost in the mire of the struggles that this offense had the first, call it 8 weeks, was the fact that this offensive line was playing like pretty well, right? I think that a pleasant surprise to a lot of the fan base how well they were playing, which then on the flip side adds to more of the frustration of, okay, why can't this offense get going? But we look at what they did Sunday, right? Aiden O'Connell stays upright the entire game, and Josh Jacobs gets rolling really for the first time in 2023. Like, what did you see from the big guys up front and kind of how they were able to kind of consistently exert their will on that Giants D line?
Yeah, they're not top 5 for us across the entire season in pressure rate allowed, and top 5 in pass block grade. You also then shrink it down to what we call, true pass set. So you take out play action, you take out throws in under 2 seconds, screens, things of that nature, and they're still a top 10 unit from a pass protection standpoint in the NFL. And I think the beauty there is, look, we knew Colton Miller is one of the best left tackles in football. Frankly, probably belongs on some of the more underrated guys across the league's
100%.
list. But I think, yeah, the growth from Dylan Parham, and I think he looks for work. He looks to take on other assignments if he doesn't have a guy in a one-on-one matchup. The growth of a lot of these young players has been really, really encouraging. And then you go back to Bo Hardegree, the fastest average time to throw in the entire NFL in Week 9 was Aiden O'Connell at 2.1 seconds. Like, you're protecting everybody, and it led to great results.
So let me ask you this then, right? I'll ask you to put on your, okay, what happened hat for a sec. We talk about the offensive line, right? I think we talk about how well they have played for bits and, portions of this year prior to Sunday, right? You got Josh Jacobs. You're talking about all these things that the Raiders offense did well. Why didn't it click the first 8 weeks for this group?
It's a good question. Obviously, you're bringing in a new quarterback, and I know he has familiarity with Josh McDaniels, but it's always going to be a bit of a learning curve as you're working through a new offense, a new situation, a new supporting cast. And frankly, Jimmy Garoppolo went from probably the best surrounding circumstances anybody can have in the entire NFL, to also just a scheme where it's different route combinations. It's a different approach to the offense in a general sense, a little bit more static, not as much, bunches and stacks and creating free releases for players and attacking the middle of the football field. Like there's some of that in Josh McDaniels' offense, but it's not nearly to the same degree. All the pre-snap motion and play action and all those things that elevated what Jimmy Garoppolo does was not, as present here. So maybe it would have come in time, but I think, it makes a lot of sense now to play Aiden O'Connell. But yeah, it's just, I think it more so to do with just the clunkiness of a transition, and then just simplifying things has looked like the smart approach so far in the new regime.
Look, I want to ride this positive vibe. I want to ride this wave as long as we can, Brad. Realistically, though, as the Raiders going to, as we kind of start the second half of 2023, so much excitement in this fan base for obvious reasons about Aiden O'Connell, what he has done in now 2 appearances, limited game action, but it sounds like he will be the guy. What is a realistic expectation for the growth that this fan base should want to see from Aiden down the stretch here?
Like I mentioned, even before the game started, I know this building was very, very high in his potential and thought they'd found a gem, a late round gem in O'Connell. Look, he is not a tremendous athlete, but I think has the ability to manipulate the pocket and avoid pressure. We saw it, better in this game than, of course, the Chargers game. He has a live arm. All the cliches you want to throw out there. Yep. He can make all the throws. I mean, the ball to Tucker, I think, was perfectly placed. He didn't have to dive for it, but, clearly had enough air underneath it. And I think you did see at Purdue over time and a good situation there as well. Going through his progressions, can see the full field, can wait for things to develop, doesn't have happy feet, has good mechanics. I think he squares his shoulders well, and it makes him an accurate passer when he does have a clean pocket. So, does he have the ceiling of a freak athlete like a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes? Maybe not, but I think you do, see a pretty high floor in what Aiden O'Connell can be, because I think all the nuances and intricacies of quarterback play, I think he's pretty good in all those areas.
Yeah, and like I said, we've seen it now. We saw it through the preseason. The guy played his rear end off in the preseason, and now a few regular season games under his belt. And I think for us, the improvement from not only game 1 to game 2, but first half to second half, I think has been really exciting for this fan base as they kind of watch him do his thing. But Brad, we talked so much about this offense for obvious reasons. We hit that magical, mythical 21-point mark. But we talked about a little bit about the offensive line, right, and how they've flown under the radar a little bit. Same could be said for Patrick Graham's defense. I mean, I have been banging the table really from week 2 on. This group, led by Max Crosby, has kept the Raiders in almost every single game. We saw what they were able to do on Sunday, the 8 sacks, the most in a decade plus for this organization. I mean, what is working for Pat Graham's group?
I think the blend of some veteran, wily guys like a Marcus Peters still due for a pick 6 at least once or twice a year, but also the growth of, Nate Hobbs has been a good player, can play inside, outside. I like the approach of in the secondary in particular. You saw a great Amik Robertson performance, obviously, in this game, had to pick another pass breakup, only allowed 17 receiving yards on 2 receptions. But I think it's a good blend of the Trayvon Morrigs and all these young guys with some veteran players like a John Jenkins, like a Robert Spillane, that are assignment sound, that know where they're supposed to be. You are trying to transition into a new, younger group, but those guys matter. Your Adam Butlers, your Bilal Nichols. It's a good blend of young and old, of experienced and savvy, and kind of learning on the fly. And I think that's what you're seeing too, is Graham also, puts his guys in position to succeed. He is adaptable. He's not a guy that has a system. He went to New York, tried to play a ton of man coverage, realized he didn't have the horses to do it, and just pivoted. And I think the same in Las Vegas. He's adapting the scheme to their talent, not forcing them to play what he likes to play, which sounds simple, but is not something every defensive or offensive coordinator does across the league.
And Brett, I'll admit my bias here, right? I see most of the world through silver and black tinted glasses most days, but I'm just curious, man. Make me smarter. Keep me honest, brother. What does my guy, Max Crosby, need to do to kind of find himself in the conversation of Defensive Player of the Year? There's nothing on the football field this man can't do, and we see it week after week after week. And it feels like from we're sitting here in the desert, the conversation is changing a little bit, but realistically, do we think that our guy is in that kind of upper echelon of pass rushers?
100%. You know, PFF does has the most
There we
pressures for
go.
us in the NFL. Oh yeah, you know, has the most pressures the last, I think, 2 seasons, and is leading so far this season as well. Simply does not come off the football field. He also led all edge rushers and defensive stops against the run last year, and I think is again leading that category. Sadly, there's probably factors outside of his control, namely winning football games, but also the traditional stats. Like, he might need to have a 15 sack season to get into that conversation, which, again, you know, us numbers nerds think is kind of silly. The underlying metrics are exceptional for Max Crosby, but I think he'll get there. I mean, I think we're starting, like you said, we're seeing a slow sea change. And the biggest thing for me is he does not come off the field. Like, he literally does not take plays off. If you're talking about value and defensive player of the year and MVP, whatever, why would you not factor in how many snaps he's actually contributing, and no one plays more than Max Crosby?
And a bit of, I guess, a bit of a philosophical question for you. It's like, we were talking to someone the other day, and they said that, you know, they think that to use your term, like the sea change to Max is changing maybe a little bit slower because it feels like there's guys that have done it longer than him that maybe are going to be in that upper echelon of, like, hey, in that conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't necessarily know if I buy that, but, like, kind of where do you stand on that?
I feel like it's also, people just get tethered to draft status and things of that nature. Like, if he was a top 10 pick versus a 4th rounder, it's probably a different conversation. It all sounds silly, but that's how those narrative awards tend to go. Whether it's all pro or defensive player of the year, etc. That's just how the NFL has always been. But yeah, I think because of, you know, film guys like Baldinger and other people across the NFL that refuse to let us not acknowledge the greatness of a Max Crosby, I think we're steering in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'm going to captain that ship till the cows come home, brother. I will be at the helm, wearing my eye patch, going full Raiders, screaming for my guy Mad Max. I don't, and like I said, you know, Sunday was so important, I think, for not only this locker room, but for this fan base to kind of have that infusion of positive energy, positive vibes. And certainly this building is feeling that. And it's a really, really cool moment we're living in right now. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about your 2023 Raiders on Sunday night against the Jets, right? I know that the offensive numbers don't scare anyone, but that is a legit big dog defense that is coming to Allegiant Stadium. Kind of what are your expectations of this game coming up here on Sunday night in primetime?
You know, I think if you adjust for the opponents, you probably have a decent argument this is the best defense in the NFL, in the New York Jets. I mean, Justin Herbert had 136 passing yards, was pressured on 60% of dropbacks. I think had 1 completion over 10-plus yards downfield. You look at Mahomes against his team, bad. Jalen Hurts against his team, bad. It's going to be a challenge. You know, without blitzing, the Jets are 3rd in pressure rate on non-blitz dropbacks. So their ability to then sit back and have, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, you know, et cetera, in the secondary, a great linebacker core. Long answer short, I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring battle. However, on the flip side, this Jets offensive line is decimated with injury. Another one announced today in Billy Turner, who started at right tackle for them and allowed 10 pressures against the Chargers. He's now probably going to miss this next game. And Zach Wilson, I think you've seen him regress back to, you know, early days. Zach Wilson taking ugly sacks, holding on to the football too long, putting the ball in harm's way. So I think it's another ugly matchup. And I really do think the Raiders can, if you avoid mistakes on offense, and then if you just, you know, don't let the Jets score much at all, I think you can pull out an ugly victory here potentially.
OG Eddie clocking in, run the ball. Run it, baby. Just give Josh Jacobs. I want that guy to be the most tired man in the NFL on Monday morning when he breaks up, Brad. Before I let you go, though, quick question for you. Do my pals at PFF, do we grade punters these days?
We do.
Where's my guy AJ Cole coming in? Because AJ is coming off of a literal NFL history moment on Sunday. What was it? It was 63.6, the highest single game net average in league history. Not too shabby. Not too shabby for my guy, Mr. Cole.
I love this. AJ Cole is PFF's highest graded punter in the entire NFL.
Let's go!
I swear I'm not making that up. He has an 89.6 punt grade. He has a long of 70, which is tops in the NFL. He's put 17 of them inside the 20-yard line. He's as good as it gets.
Let's go. Oh, I promise you, I didn't know that. I didn't set you up for greatness there.
I believe you.
It's so good. And as our resident special teams advocate, Brad, I will go to my grave preaching the importance of special teams. You lifted me up. You said your vibes were as high as the locker rooms. Now I have joined you up there. But man, this was a lot of fun. On our way out, though, let me know, 30 seconds of plugs. Where can the people find you and all the cool stuff you guys are doing at PFF?
Of course. Thanks for having me. You can follow me on Twitter at PFF_Brad. And of course, all our content coming out of PFF.com. I cover a lot of contract, salary cap, all those, topics. And of course, talking ball. You can follow me on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Like I said, thanks for having me.
Attaboy. Love it, love it, love it. Well, Brad, we appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Best of luck the rest of the way. And we got to get you out to Vegas sooner or later.
Sounds good to me.